Hello, welcome to the May 9th, 2025 Club Cubase live stream. My name is Greg Undo and I'm the host of the live stream today. If you have not attended a live stream before, how it works is you can ask questions in the live chat field or simply send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, realize that my ability to answer the questions in a real-time manner may soon be eclipsed with the number of questions asked. So if you don't see an immediate response to your question, if we could avoid asking the same question repeatedly, that would be appreciated. It makes it a lot easier for us to get through more questions in the session. When asking questions, it's helpful if you could specify which version of Cubase you're running, if it's Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro. Also, if you could indicate which version number, so if it's 12, 13, 14, and which operating system you're using. So if it's Cubase for Mac OS or Windows, that information is helpful. And we should have an index of all of the topics that are covered in today's live stream pinned to the top of the comments field several hours after the live stream ends. So you could, and that will contain timestamps so that you could quickly navigate to a particular topic to find what you're looking for. And if you wanted to search for topics and if you're looking for topics that have been covered in previous live streams, we could go to cubaseindex.com, and we want to thank Jan from Stockholm for creating the wonderful site where you could search for topics. I think we've covered over 39,000 topics in the live streams. We also want to give special thanks. We have two people that serve as moderators, Jazz Dude and Agent K. They're not Steinberg employees. They just really make it want to make it a better community experience. So we'll give special thanks to them. Also, we'll give Jazz Dude special kudos for his work with the Cubase Nation Discord. So the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord, which is a wonderful reference and compendium of links and YouTube tutorials that's very beneficial to the Steinberg community. So once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America. I primarily focus on Steinberg products, and I'm the host today. I'm presenting from just outside of Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you are watching this live, or if you're watching it on a replay, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. And with that, we will go ahead and get started. All right, we see Tim K joining from Zeist in the Netherlands. His cat Buddy is waving a paw hello to my cat Steven and Stella, Mark Raven's dog, and other pets nearby. We have Stefan checking in from Sweden. All right, we see Michael Marshall. Great to see you from Somerset in the UK. Uno Memento, very loyal Steinberg user and live stream attendee, checking in from Finland, where summer is coming soon and the boats are ready for the lake. We have Dean Garvey Jazz checking in from the southern Sierra Mountains north of Los Angeles. Thanks for joining us today. It's a beautiful part of Los Angeles in Southern California. All right, we see Vince checking in from Winnipeg, Canada. We have Petra Schmidt checking in from Germany. We see John Barry from Devon, England. And Michael Marshall and John Barry are nearly neighbors, they say. Michael Marshall indicates. We have DJ FK on. We have Joshua Aguiledo on, saying hello. Thanks for joining us. Tony Trunzo from Australia. All right, Daniel Pashman asks, is there a way to get chords to strum with any of the MIDI effects, wanting the chords to play back? Eighth note strumming. So, some of the patterns, let's just go to a particular project here. I think I may have a quick guitar part. Okay, so let's say I want to come over and let me just populate some MIDI data from our chord track. All right, so let's say we have nylon guitar part here. All right, so here I may already have a MIDI insert. So I have the Apache SX. So let's say if we look at my MIDI part directly here. So we just have some chords, like block chords laid out for us. So now what I'm going to do is I just opened up like an Apache SX here. And if we look at this particular plugin, and what I'm going to do is I just set this on sequencer, and we can say, okay, I want to do this as 16th notes. So, but as I just want to come over here, and we could change this if you want it to be. And then there are different presets that you could use. So if you want to go to factory presets, you could come over here and say guitar mappable sequences. So let's say, okay, I want to do like a pop bossa nova. Or let's do a samba. So you could just try out some of the different guitar. And this is all just kind of being triggered directly from real like block chords being played directly in. So if you wanted to just be able to adjust, you know, with particular presets, or just be able to set different values here for the arpeggio, you can do that quite easily using the Apache SX plugin. So check that out. All right. All right, we see Jan from Cubase Index giving kudos to Jazz Dude for the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord. All right, so we see Fly V just says new PC had default icon missing that I just had someone from Microsoft sync and run my PC while I was on the phone with them, and they fixed it. So that's great. All right, wonderful to see Parabot 2 on. We see Kerwin Young checking in from Atlanta, Georgia. We have Chigwe Ubuka just saying hello to everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We have B Master Productions checking in from Sweden. All right, Ted Carpenter checking in from Washington, D.C. So just up the river from me just a little bit, about 10 miles. It says, can you explain how to do the explode chord functions in Cubase 14? It works differently than the way it was originally done in Cubase 13. So like the chords function that we had explode was part of the score editor before, and I don't think it's that functionality. While they're adding lots of stuff into the score editor, I don't think that the explode function has made it from Cubase 13 to Cubase 14 for like a direct equivalent for that. But let's say if we go into our score editor, we'll look at our chords here, and let's say we want this to be more of like a grand staff. So we'll go to our instrument settings, and let's just say if we want So I don't think that there's like, when you get to the score menu, used to be the explode functionality. But I don't think that equivalent has made it in. Now, I think what we could do is, if we have a particular part here, is use the logical editor. So let's see if we can get that figured out. And we could say, let's go to our logical editor. Let's get to setup. And we want to say type is equal to note. We want to transform. Let's say we may just choose to extract. And then we can say our notes, and we can say our context variable. Let's see if that's the right one, or let's see if we can do assigned voice. All right, let me just. So let's try context variable, and we'll say equal to the lowest in chord. Let's change this value to 1. Just see if that did trick. See if there's any data in there. No. We'll say position in the chord track, so we'll say root note, and let's erase these two. All right, so now we can say let's extract the root notes of the chord. Let's extract like the minor third or major third. And we'll switch this context variable to or as opposed to and. So now when I select this, we could extract the thirds from the chords. We could extract the perfect fifths from the chords, and we could save each of these as presets. So I know it's not the same functionality or as convenient as the previous iteration, but I think it's still, a fairly, the score editor is completely redone for Cubase here, so we could extract kind of the fifths within the chord. So we could kind of extract our different components here by different voices. So I'm sure that the team is aware of that and will be kind of providing hopefully similar functionality to what was in 13. You could always take the project into 13 really quick and just do the explode. But as we add kind of a whole new generation of score editor, it's not going to have every single thing. And we can see that after the maintenance updates that there were significant new features to the scoring. So, but thanks for joining us, Ted. Great to see Matt Elston checking in and Tim Weinheimer from Mission Viejo. We have Corin from Sheffield, UK. All right, and Corin's question is, I need explanation with effects and my Modi X. Do I need to create an effects track to add effects? So probably if you have an external instrument, you need to be able to define the particular instrument as if you want to run it with your software effects. We need to take the like probably most likely an audio output, most likely an analog output. We'll go to your audio connections, go to external instruments, and so let's say if you have your motif or a Modi X or a montage, we want to connect this into two inputs of your audio interface. Once we have those two inputs defined in your audio interface, we would then come over here, we would add an instrument track, and we would see under external plugins, we would see kind of your Modi X or whatever you've labeled it would show up there. We'll have kind of, and once we're running it as an external instrument, now all of the effects, if for software effects, can be just simply applied directly here. All of your software effects can be applied to the external instrument. So that's how you could get the effects. So you need to define it. And basically we need to define it under audio connections as an external instrument. So we're taking the audio out of the instrument to inputs. So you need to have additional inputs on your audio interface so that the audio from your Modi X can get into the computer. Once it's in the computer and defined as a virtual instrument, you load up an instrument track and route it to that instrument. Then you could apply all of your channel EQs, so you have the channel strip, the EQ, plus all of your effects directly here. All right, so we have Martin checking in, I believe, from Germany. All right, great to see Millard Brown from Pennsylvania. It's rainy and chilly, so it's pretty similar here. All right, we have CIG checking in from Nigeria. Thanks for joining us. All right, and we have Bratman Studio Rick checking in from 92 degrees in Whittier, California. It says last streaming it was 63 and overcast. Matt Elliston has Cubase 14 Pro question, please. I used a Hallian Sonic instrument track for MIDI piano. It recorded great with the sustain pedal function and came back next day and added another track, same and no sustain. No sustain when playing back. Any ideas? So usually it's going to kind of function as expected. So we could see if so it recorded great with the sustain pedal function, came back next day, added another track, same and no sustain. So the one thing that you could always do, like I have a sustain pedal here, so if it's not, you want to make sure that the sustain pedal is actually transmitting. So I'm going to add just an instrument track. So let's just say, okay, I'm going to we'll open up a Hallian Sonic here. And on this instrument track, there is a MIDI plugin, and we call this MIDI plugin MIDI monitor. So right now, when I hit my sustain pedal, we could see that what MIDI information is coming into the particular track. So now I hit the sustain pedal, and we could see that Cubase is seeing the sustain pedal. So make sure that the sustain pedal information is coming into your Cubase to start with, because if it's, for some reason, if it's being blocked, we could see that. Now also we could check just to make sure, like if I come to this particular track and I hit record, that now as soon as I hit record, I could press my sustain pedal down, and we could see that we're going to have sustain pedal information. If we look at it in our list editor, we can see, okay, that we have our sustain, so we can see that that's coming in. Another method to see is just to make sure that it's in the list editor to see if the sustain. If there's also a possibility that maybe it's getting filtered out, so check if you go to your preferences or settings, we can come over and you'll see under MIDI to MIDI filter, make sure that you don't have any filters here. So sometimes you might have a controller that's set up, but make sure that the sustain pedal first is transmitting in to make sure that your controller is transmitting it with the MIDI monitor plugin. And then you could see, and that will let you know if the information is coming in. If it's coming in and not recording, then it might be filtered out. So give those suggestions a try and let me know. And make sure it's obviously connected. If for some reason it got disconnected for any particular reason, you might be able to see. All right, so also checking from Montenegro. All right, Jack Bourne says, how can I make sure my Cubase 14 presets are in the correct spot? I feel like everything is always in the older version preset folder. So generally there's one preset folder, and then all of the versions of Cubase will access that one folder. So it's not necessarily tied to Cubase 12 or 13 or 14. It's kind of just a preset folder that's independent of the installed version, and then that installed version automatically looks into that common folder, and then that common folder will be used for any of the versions. All right, we have Brad Melismoen checking in from Saskatchewan. Thanks for joining us. Tim K is just commenting that it's a nice international crowd today. So we see, is the kit called Groove Agent Common Content a free one? I don't have it on my PC, so let me just take a look. So we'll just come over here. I don't see if that's the preset name, Groove Agent Common Content, or if that's the library name. I don't see a preset with that particular name. Let's just go over, if we go to the Steinberg download assistant, just see me out there. But I don't think that is a particular. Let me know if it's a preset that you're looking for, or if it's. But it doesn't seem like it's a preset in Groove Agent, or it might be a kit that I don't have installed. But let me know if it's a particular library or where you saw the name from, Vince, and we'll see if we get it figured out for you. Kerwin Young just saying, echoing Tim K's comments, is like the global family. All right, Jack Bourne says, couldn't figure out why there was no sound. I thought Greg was taking a while. I had the video paused. So I always panic when there's no sound. It's like nothing like, because I can't really monitor in real time. So there's nothing like doing like 25 minutes and then having no sound and reading about the comments later. All right, but glad you got it figured out. You're one mouse click away from happiness. All right, we have Raw Justice Hip Hop checking in from Capitol Heights, Maryland. Thanks for joining us. It's right across the river and up a little bit for me. All right, uno momento wants people to whack the like button. Balsa asks, says, "Hi Greg, in Drum Machine, is it possible to audition the synthesized drum sounds that Cubase provides? Clicking on them automatically puts them in a part." So yeah, it's kind of the behavior that's how it works. So I've kind of asked for the same behavior so that you could audition different sounds without having to load them. I'll just see if it's done any changes. So let's say if we add a drum track, we'll come over. So we'll go to the drum machine here. So yeah, so when we kind of click, we have multiple bass drums, but it seems like it has to be kind of you audition from here. I'll kind of reiterate that again to the team, but I think it makes sense to be able to audition which hi-hats you want without having to load it, audition it, and then unload the pad. So, but yeah, currently you kind of load it and then audition. I realize that's not the most convenient workflow. All right, wonderful to see Val on from Vienna. All right, Val's question is there a way to auto-detect hit points and or warp markers for a recorded clip? Okay. All right, so the hit points are automatically detected. So let's say if I come over here and we look at like our acoustic guitar, when we double click on it and we go to hit points, that we could see all of the hit points for the guitars are kind of automatically done. And this is a preference that could be turned on or off. So we go to maybe under editing audio, see if it's in here. Yeah, so under editing audio, enable automatic hit point detection. So this way the hit points are automatically detected as the file is recorded. So if that is turned on, which is the default state, then it will automatically determine the hit points. Now, how we can turn these particular hit points into warp markers, there's a couple different ways. So let's say I want to adjust the sensitivity, the threshold here, and maybe kind of the intensity of this. But if we now, there's two ways. One is if we want to turn these hit points into warp markers, what we could do is within the hit points in the sample editor, we could choose to create warp markers here. Another method, if you want to do it more from menus, is to go to audio, to real-time processing, and choose create warp markers from hit points. Once that is done and we go to our free warp mode and we kind of zoom in, we could see our various warp markers so that we can move our different elements around. So Cubase will automatically detect hit points. You may have to tweak that, and then it's one mouse click in either the hit point editor, in the sample editor, in the hit points under create the warp markers, or go to your audio menu to advanced, or to real-time processing rather, and then create warp markers from the hit points. So the warp markers aren't automatically detected, but again, one mouse click. All right, we have Pastoral Apologetics saying Southeast Texas is in the house. Yeah, my brother is up visiting. Got in last night from Houston area. Okay, sorry, my chat field just jumped. All right, found my spot. So we see from CIG, sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. If you want to spell it phonetically, I'll try to get it right. He just says, there's so much I'll need to learn. I was only started using Cubase a few months ago. Congratulations on joining the Steinberg family, and we hope that we could answer lots of questions for you here in the live stream to make your transition into Cubase smooth. So wonderful to see Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas. We missed you while you're on vacation. So rumor was that you were in Italy, so we're looking for some good, maybe gelato or new ice cream flavors. But so wonderful to have you back, Michael. Hope you had a wonderful trip. All right, so we see Cosnova23 just says, brilliant, thank you. You're welcome. All right. All right, Michael Teams is giving Radar the band 1 gallon of banana nut ice cream. Everyone's happy to see Michael Teams back. All right, Perry Michael Allen just says, hello from Amsterdam. And his question is, can I export a binaural wave using Renderer 7.14? All right, so if we want to do like a binaural file, let me just get one going here. All right, so say we have, I'll just create a quick Atmos version of this. So let's come over here and go to my project menu. So I have just a file in 48K, and I want to be able to export this as binaural. So let's go to our setup assistant. I'll check all the boxes. I'll hit OK. Just make sure my buffer is set correctly. And you set this to 512. And make sure you're at 48K. All right, so now I want to do my down mix here to binaural. So now when we want to do some quick automation of the panner, I'll come over. All right, I'll just start at the beginning here. Now let me automate the panner on the track. Okay, so all right, so now when we listen to this back, if you have headphones on, you may hear this kind of spinning around, kind of behind you, to going to your, let's say, like 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock on the clock. All right, so now if we want to export this as a binaural file, we will go into our mix console here. I think it's where we have, move this up a little bit here. So let's get to our renderer bed. And what I want to do is, so first we need to go to your audio connection. So this will add our outputs. I also have my renderer output. I have my stereo output. So on the bed, I want to be able to send, we'll go to destination, and I want to send this out to my stereo out. Okay, so we're going to turn that on. And now when I export, All right, we're going to do a stereo mix, and I'll export it to my desktop here. All right, we'll just choose different path. All right, now let me just find a file. All right, we'll just confirm here. All right, I don't want to do that. Let me just. All right, and I'll switch my master. So once again, if we just come directly to this, now we have our binaural mix. So just on the bed track, you just want to route it to the stereo and then just do an export audio mix down. That will give you your binaural file. All right, you see Matt Elliston just says, thanks, Greg, very helpful. All right, so we have SE Tracks asks, Greg, show me how to do a punch in and punch out record while using vocals, like if I want to mark a section where I want to record and stop where I want it to stop. Okay, so let's say if I have, I'll just revert this. So let's say this is our vocal file, and we want, or let's say we want to do a punch in here. So there's one preference that's really handy for doing a lot of like punches for just little sections of vocals. So if you go to editing, you can say cycle follows range selection. Okay, so by default the left and right locators can be set. So let's say I want to punch in right here in this phrase. So I'm going to take my snap off so it's not snapping to the grid. And then when I use the range selection, you notice that the left and right locators will automatically be set. So I'm going to click on I and O on my computer keyboard, or on a transport, just to the left of the transport, you'll see the punch in and punch out commands. So now at this point, I'll just set, let's say, fake input. All right, and when we go to record, when it gets to that section of the song, it'll punch in. All right, and let me arm the track for record. So we come here. So once you have, so if you hit I and O and you have that preference set, you can say, oh, we need to do this line again. And if you wanted to do a section like multiple times where maybe you think that the singer's not going to get, or the musician's not going to get a particular phrase, we could, once we set that range, if we hit kind of the slash or activate the loop, at this point we could, and then it will just kind of cycle back and forth. Now, if we wanted to set a range, and we wanted this as a reference, but we only wanted to punch in let's say in this one word, but we wanted the kind of our pre-roll and post-roll. If we go to the transport, we could use something called punch points. So we could now come over here and we could say set. So once we have our punch points, so we can say, okay, I want to do that to the selected range. We could have these little red triangles, and I could say, okay, I want the punch in just on this one particular word, but I want the loop to immediately give us before and after. So as we play, we'll see it loop, punch, punch out, loop. So make sure that you have the punch in points here, I, and you could also turn those on by clicking on them in the transport or hitting the I and O key on your computer keyboard. By default, that will map to the left and right locators, but if you needed finer control, you could set up punch points from the transport menu and then set up your punch, and then super easy to get really tight punches. So much better than analog tape machine days. So let me know if that's helpful for you, SE Tracks. See, Michael Teams is granted Uno Momento 1 gallon of pistachio mint ice cream. All right, Belu Frank just says, hi Greg, I have a problem in Cubase 14. I can't get my external effects to work. Everything is set up properly and works fine with Cubase 13, but I have no signal on the effects track VU meter in 14. So check to make sure, one thing that could throw this off depending on your audio interface, if all the routing is the same, is to see if direct monitoring, try toggling your direct monitoring status depending on your routing of the external effects. If it's set to direct monitoring, that may just send it directly to the input to the output and not is not had any, and that may kind of send it to the wrong destination. So check that out of curiosity. All right, we say Outlaws Workshop checking in from the Netherlands. So DJ FK just says, hope your gig went well. So yeah, it wasn't a gig, it was just a like NAMM, which is kind of our industry that we have, like an industry association. They were having a day of advocacy for legislation with representatives and senators in Washington. So I had lots of friends in for that, so I got invited to one of those events. But I do have a gig next Sunday with the Washington Philharmonic Orchestra, so looking forward. Washington Metropolitan Philharmonic, so looking forward to that. It's a good program. All Dvorak, so the 8th Slavonic dances and the cello concerto. Tim K says, one mouse click away from happiness needs to be on a t-shirt, Greg. I would have to give my dear friend and one of the smartest people in the world, Greg Lukens, that's one of his sayings, so I'd have to give him all the royalties for t-shirts. He's the one that always solves problems when people are trying to figure something out and he's blind. So he's like, just one mouse click away from happiness. So, but somehow Greg can always find a solution when everyone's looking at something and they can't figure it out, and Greg just has the answer all the times, and he's always right. All right, my chat field just jumped. All right. Okay, so we see from Val says, okay, I had a preference, but sometimes maybe I have to tweak it more. Thanks, Greg. Okay. All right, so Tim K just says, so many things in Cubase just work that way. This is a one mouse click from happiness. It's a great Greg quote. So. All right, Bratman Studio just asks, Greg, can you explain the different time uses as elastic, etc.? What would we change them for? All right, so when we have algorithms that for when we're doing time stretching, we will see different algorithms here. So earlier, Cubase, we started doing real-time time stretching in SX3. And with SX3, we had these algorithms, and then we licensed the Elastic algorithms, which are used by a lot of other companies. So we see kind of three different variations of three versions. So one of these we see the Elastic Pro, time, pitch, and tape. All right, so with time, so we see time, pitch, tape, and then we could have formant, and then we could have efficient. So between these three, we would say that the efficient is if you have older CPUs. So maybe not as high a quality algorithm, but if you have if you're doing warping, like real-time warping on 400 tracks, you could, you have an old computer, and if it's starting to choke a little bit with too much audio performance being utilized, then you could use the efficient. The formant is going to preserve formants. So a lot of times when you do like extreme time stretching, we could call this like the munchkinization, or what the like the little munchkins would do, that where you hear kind of an extreme change in the timbre of the voice, often making a female sound male or male sound female, etc. So you could preserve formants. And then we have kind of just the normal elastic. Now each of these has three variations. One that favors rhythm, and that would be time. So drums, maybe rhythm guitar. We have pitch, so this would favor pitch. So maybe if you're doing like a fretless bass or a melodic saxophone, vocals obviously would fall here. And then there's tape. So tape would kind of mimic the behavior of an analog tape machine. So if you slow an analog tape machine, not only does the pitch change, but the length and the pitch change simultaneously. So if you wanted to do like a very speed type recording, you could use tape. So think one for rhythm, one for more like melodic instruments, and then tape. And then we have those three choices within each of the algorithms. One, if you wanted to preserve the formants, so that if things sounded a little weird, you could preserve the formants. You could use a regular algorithm, or if you're trying to do a lot of real-time time stretching on an older computer, then use the efficient algorithms. All right, so we see Michael Teams. It says, thanks, Greg, a great trip, but glad to be back. Yeah, it's always good to have your, I always try to make my home life feel like I'm on vacation while I'm at home. All right, so we see in Cyrillic, I wish I could pronounce it, hello, everyone. So thanks for joining us. I believe it's Cyrillic. Sorry for my ignorance not being able to read it. All right, Michael Teams has granted my family and I 1 gallon of coconut, is it Frashy gelato? Sounds good. I proposed to my wife with a hazelnut gelato, so that's always special to us. In Venice at St. Mark's Square. She thought I was going to ask her how she liked her gelato. Anyway. All right, Tim Weinheimer asks, can you show setting up cycle markers and if there's a key command to turn them on? Okay, so let's say if we come over here to, we'll go to add a marker track. Okay. All right, so there's two different types of markers for those that aren't aware. One is just a marker that we could click, and then so we could put a position marker, and a position marker is just going to, when we click, is just automatically going to, let me just turn it on so that. All right, so as we click, we can put our markers to notate a specific position. Now, think if we want to just hold down the control key, we can set markers, and as we drag across this, we could create a cycle marker. So we could say we need to annotate this particular range. Now, one trick that a lot of people may not know is if we drag across, let's say if I hold down the shift key, I could now type the names of markers in. And I think if I drag across while holding the shift key, we can type a description on our marker field there as well. So now if we wanted a particular key command or function, I think, I'm not sure if there's a default, but let's say we want to go to key commands, and we could say add marker. So here we could add a, there's not key commands that are defined, but you could, I think on the Windows platform, if you hit the insert key, let's see if that does it for markers. I think on the Windows platform that you could hit the insert key, but the insert key doesn't work on Mac OS, which is what I'm on. But you can, if you just come to the key commands here, you could assign markers. So let's say we just come over here to marker, and here we could choose to add a cycle marker on the selected track, or on the active tracks. So at this point we could just add cycle markers on and assign keyboard shortcuts to that. But I think a lot of people now will just kind of drag across and make a marker from there. And or if you have kind of a range selected, so let's say I have this range selected, we can now come over here and click on add a cycle marker based on the range selection right there. Or just you could do that directly with and trigger add the cycle marker right there with different key commands that you define. All right, so we have a question. Where is the location of reference user presets on Mac? I want to import my presets to this reverb. Thanks. So I'm not sure if it's presets. The presets should automatically show up. So let's say if I come over here, let's just add our effects track. Okay, so we have reference already. So let's say if I save a preset, all right, we'll call this May 16th, or we'll call it May 9th, 2025. Okay, so now when we come over, we have our user preset. So when we come, we could say, let's go to user presets, and we could say VST effects presets, and we'll see May 9th, 2025, one that we just created. So any of your user effects that you've done from one version should automatically show up And if we want to right click on that preset, we could say reveal in Finder, and this is the user preset location. So any of your presets, you could just look right in here or drop your presets directly into this folder. So once you have that preset saved, again, we will go to user presets, VSTFX presets, and then you could choose, okay, I just want to see my reference presets, but right click and reveal in Finder, and then that will take you directly to the folder. But your presets from version 13 should automatically show up in 14. All right, so we see Flyv says he's just learning Groove Agent's new browser. DJFK just says that's cool. All right, Balsa asks, hi Greg, when having two different MIDI instruments open in a MIDI editor, is there a visual indicator to show overlapping notes? All right, so let's see if we could. See if I. Let me just look for a quick. I thought I just had this project open. Let me just make sure. I'll just open up a quick project that would show this. All right, so one of the things that I like to do is, let's say if I want to look at a flute and French horn parts here. So I come here, let's select both of those. All right, so we can see, well, maybe we'll come over here. We can see both of the events. All right, so when I do colors and I'm doing multi-part, I like to colorize by part. Then we could see, so let me just create notes that, and I'm going to select the green here and I'm going to draw in a note. So right now, if I come here, I select, let's say, draw in a long note here in this voice and the flute voice, and it's overlapping with that. But when I switch to like the French horn voice, we can see that the French horn voice is kind of highlighted, and when we switch to the flute voice, that the flute voice is highlighted. So both notes are overlapping. We could see kind of the underlying flute voice that's longer here, but depending on which is the active voice is the one that we're actually editing. So, and you could actually just kind of switch here between, you know, your horn parts and your flute parts as well to make those the active ones. So let me know if that's helpful for you, but then we could see the overlapping events and make one active over the other. And even if it's invisible, like when we come here, the horn part is invisible when the flute is the active voice because it doesn't, let's say it's completely encompasses the part, but when we come here, we can see that the red note that's shorter that was hidden is now kind of pops out front when it's overlapping, and because that's the active voice that we're editing. So let me know if that's helpful. All right, wonderful to see John Costigan checking in from Wisconsin. Thanks for joining. All right, so you see FlyV just asking, 2 other new Groove Agent things are in the browser. When previewing samples, what does the pre-listen in place? And replace pad do? Okay, so let's take a look. Okay, so let's say if we are coming over here, okay, I'll just, all right, so let me just come over. All right, it says when previewing samples, what does the pre-listen in place? All right, so just come over here. Let's say do a very simple pattern here. Okay, so let's come over to instruments and let's say, okay, I'm looking for snares. All right, so let's just all right, so let's say snare drum. Okay. Okay, so let's listen to pre-listen in place. So let's say I have this pattern. So I don't think I've replaced that sample. So it's the original sample. But now if I want to, instead of changing the particular sound, but we're kind of auditioning through this particular sound. So when I go back, it's still the original sound is loaded, but when we go to replace, so we come over here, that I can just, if I have this pad selected here, then as I come over, I'm actually changing the particular sample. So now that sample has replaced the existing sample, and it's not just auditioning through. When we have this checked, the pre-listen in place, I could audition without loading those particular samples. When that is turned off, when we select different sounds, then at that point it's so we turn this off now. When I replace, that's disabled, then all the samples are being replaced on the pad and not just playing through this replacement sound for auditioning. So if you change your mind, you could do the pre-listen in place, and if you like it, then just simply turn that off and double click and load it up. All right. Milton Signani Rojas asks, hello everyone, I have a Cubase project with bass, guitar, vocals, keys, drums. How can I load my own templates for mixing? So, a couple of things that you could do, so if you wanted to have, like, let's say if we have everything kind of set up, I'll just come over here. So let's say if we have if we wanted to have almost like mixer presets, if you will. So let's say if I have something like this and I want that consistency. So let's say I have my mixer. So I'm going to select my first track. We'll select, let's say, all of my tracks here. And then if we go to the settings, let's see if it's in here. All right, I'll just get to the full screen mixer here. It's one of those features that moves periodically. Let me just hide my input channels here. All right, let me just see if I select some here. Okay, so we're going to say, I'm going to take my mixer here, and we come right here. Let me just see if it's... And then we could click right here to save selected channels. So we're going to call this May 9th, 2025. Okay, so let's come over and let's reset our mix console channels. Okay, so if I'm looking for kind of like a place to start off, then I could just come right over here. Let's say, let's load selected channels. And we'll say May 9th, 2025. And then we could have all of the settings preserved for you. So again, when you have the audio track selected, just come over here, save selected channels, and then load selected channels from within the mix console. And then you could go and just, I'm working on the same song. I want my drums to be set up the same exact way. So if I just want to take my drums or the selected channels, just come right over here, load our selected channels preset. And that way you can have kind of consistency from one song to another song. All right, We see Venox says, oh, this is very helpful. All right, we see John Costigan has gotten 1 gallon of butter pecan ice cream from Michael Teams. All right, Venox asks, how do you set multiple monitor outputs like headphones, studio monitors, etc., and how to switch easily between them? So when we go to your audio connections, this is a great use of the control room. So we'll make sure that you go to the control room and then that you have it activated. And then once you're here, you could have headphones. You could have a headphone channel. You could also come over here. You could have up to 4 different monitors. You'd need an audio interface with enough outputs to feed these. So maybe outputs 1 and 2 for your first set of speakers. Your second set could be outputs 3 and 4, whatever. So, and now when we want to switch between your different outputs, we could go to your control room. And then as we come over here, you could just say, okay, I want to switch between my NS10s. I don't have these. You're not going to be able to hear them necessarily. You could just switch between your different speakers, whether it's in stereo 5.1, 7.1.4, but you could just have even key commands to switch to dedicated monitor outputs, or you just want to listen to your headphones. You could come over here and just turn this off and have the headphones going. So that way your headphones could be just routed independently. So set it up. Again, go to your audio connections, your control room, and let's go to and just set your outputs from your audio interface. They're going to your speakers and switch right here between the different speakers. And you could have each of the speakers be different levels so that when you switch, it's going to be the same volume consistently. All right, wonderful to see Michael Teams on from Coast Mastering. Just glad to see that new media base all does missing templates issue, so thanks for letting me know. Tim K just says, it's cool to quote, it's still attributable to a Greg, just a different Greg. Yeah, so Michael Teams knows Greg Lukens well. He's an amazing individual. All right, so we see Michael Teams apparently made it to St. Mark's Square. So, yeah, it was a good spot to propose to my wife. So, all right. All right, so we have Double Bass. Says, hello, everyone. For some reason, VST plugins in Cubase and real-time 100% do not work. Is there a solution? So let me know if it's particular plugins that aren't working. If it is like when there's so many tracks that they're not working, or if it's like if you just have one track with particular plugins, if they're not working. Sometimes plugins, if they're in a trial mode, can turn on or off so that they can't be utilized. But if you give some more information, Double Bass, just let me know. There you see Tim Weinheimer just says, thanks, Greg. Perfect. You're welcome. All right, so you see Michael Teams was at Vatican City the day of the start of the conclave. That must have been incredible to be there. All right, so we see Adam just says, appreciate the work you put in doing these live streams. So I'm just glad to be able to help people. It's very rewarding being able to help so many people. All right, we see DJFK, just wishing everyone a good weekend. He's going to watch later. All right, you see Gerald Ely checking in from Martinez, California. All right, so you see Tim Weinhammer just says marker preset would be helpful feature in future versions of Cubase. Maybe they could do it. So so let me know, like, if it's just a preset to drop the markers in that you want, because you could assign a key command. I think on the Windows, the insert key will drop markers by default. Wonderful to see the artist known as Love on. Michael Teams wants people to smash the like button or no gelato for you. All right. Sorry, let's just come over here. All right, let me just find my spot. All right, Chatfield jumped. All right, Adam asks, hi, Adam from the UK. If I were to group, say, vocals together to add an insert effects, would I use a group track or an effects track for this? Unsure on the difference. So I would probably use a group track. So, it depends on, if you just wanted to run effects, you could run an effects track on that. So let's take a quick look. See if this is okay. So if it's just the effects, an effects track is sufficient, but if you're doing other types of processing, so let's say I want to come here, just okay, so here I will go ahead and let's say I'll turn off the effects. I probably have these going onto a group, right? So let's say I have a number of tracks. And as we kind of play these particular tracks here,
don't it make you feel good? Knowing that somebody loves.
Now, if I was just running just like, a single reverb, at that point I would come over here and just run like an effects track. Okay, so now when we come over here, we can say, okay, I want to run it through a reference. And now all these particular tracks, when we look at our mixer, we'll just come over now and
you. Don't it make you feel good?
And then I could take each voice.
Somebody wants to give you their heart.
All right, so now we'll come back
and make you feel good.
Now, if I wanted to do other functions, so let's say I want to take those particular tracks and I want to compress and EQ them together as one single entity, at that point I would probably run it through a group. So we'll come over here, let's add a group channel to the selected tracks. So we'll make it a stereo group. Now on my group channel here, I could add a reverb. So now if we wanted to come over here, let's just add another on the group track. I could send the group track together as one entity. So we'll say, okay, let's come over here and I will unsolo and
Somebody wants to build my fears or fly away. Don't it make you feel good? Knowing that somebody loves you.
So now all the vocals are going into the group,
Make you feel good.
and a group is going through the reverb. And now I could also come over here and say, okay, I want to do compression. So I could come over here, let's just say, okay, I want to do
Somebody just the way you are. Don't it make you feel
and let's apply EQ to all the tracks.
good? Knowing that somebody loves you. Somebody loves you.
So if I was just adding a reverb to multiple tracks, I would just do an effects end. But if I'm thinking, okay, maybe I want to be able to drag one fader and adjust the volume of all those, I want to be able to compress or run it through a de-esser or an EQ for all the different entities as one thing instead of doing it individually, then I would run it into a group. All right, great to see Artist Knows Love on. Michael Team's telling everyone smash the like button. All right, so we have question at the Source Studios. Please show how to export a MIDI track to start from a different point than record it at. I tried to locate a range, select it, but still only exports one measure before and after. Okay, so let's just do a new. Okay, so let's say I want to do a MIDI file of just this bass. Okay. Let me just. All right, so we're going to export a MIDI track to start from a different point than recorded at. I tried to locate a range, but still only exports one measure before and one measure after. Okay, so this is starting at measure 14. I'm going to export this MIDI file. So, I think when we're dealing with MIDI files themselves, the location is going to be preserved. It's kind of the intention of it. But let's come over here. So let's go to export MIDI file, and we'll say May 9th bass MIDI. Okay, and we'll come over here. All right, so let's do new project. And let's import the MIDI file. All right, so here it's probably going to export it at 14, just like it was. So I think, all right, so you want to export the MIDI track to start from a different point than record it at. I tried to locate a range selection, but only exports one measure before. All right, so to export MIDI track to start from a different point than recorded at. I tried to locate a range. So I think the locator range is only going to truncate. So let's come over, close this out. We'll jump back here. And I'm going to set my left and right locators just on a portion of that. And let's see, when we export MIDI, And I think you said you export to locator range. I think, obviously the intention of MIDI files is that they would line up in the same location. So let's import that MIDI file. So I think it's only going to be, it looks like that took the MIDI file right there. So when I selected the range, it looks like that wasn't carried over for you. So let me know if that's the same behavior that you've gotten as well. But it looks like that took just that particular range. So you can see that range that we had selected was like 17 measures, and I'll just navigate back. And that cycle range was 17 measures. So it looks like just selecting the section here, if you wanted that not to load in the same spot, and just go to export, MIDI file, give it a name, and then when you come here, just choose export locator range. But it seems like he said he did that. But it seemed like that worked as expected for me. All right, so we see from Arcal773 says, hello from relentlessly windy Chicago. I'm so excited to have 14 Pro. The recent Lander voucher has been inspiring. It's great. All right, Tim K just says, I didn't realize what that button in Groove Agent did. I read the hover text, but didn't get it. Very cool. Thanks, Greg, to whomever asked that. So I think it was Val or Y42. This is new YouTube name. All right, so we have George sending greetings from Germany, saying hi. Thanks for joining us. All right, WarU303 says, again, just dropping by to appreciate what you guys do. So thanks for dropping in, and thanks for the kind words. All right, Bellu Frank asks, hi Greg, can you explain how to insert an external effect and check that it works in Cubase 14? Thanks. I don't really have an audio interface. I don't have an external effects unit currently connected, but the process would be as you come over here to your audio connections, go to your external effects. And what you want to do is just to make sure that you have the inputs and outputs from your audio interface. And we want to take the outputs from your audio interface, and then that's going to be our send bus. And it's going out of these outputs, and then it goes into the inputs of your external effects. The outputs of your external effects will then go to inputs of your audio interface. And you tell which inputs that they're actually going into directly here. Once that is set up, we would go to, like if I wanted to add that external effect. So by the time the audio goes out of your interface into the effect and then back, that could impose some latency just on that path, that audio path. So when we go to add our external plugins, we'll say, okay, let's add our lexicon here. We have this measure for delay. So as soon as I click on that, that will ping the system and automatically calculate the latency that's imposed within the audio routing path. and that will automatically compensate your external effects. And here you could adjust your send gain and return gain. So if it's your converter isn't the right impedance for the effect, maybe it's a guitar pedal, you could adjust the input output levels to the external effect right from there. So let me know if that's helpful for you. So wonderful to see Pablo on. Says he's going to a new gig. Pablo is saying hola to everyone. All right, so you see James Daly says, never mind, he figured it out. Don't remember the question, so sorry if I missed it. All right, George just asked, how do mixer snapshots work and how do they cope in case you delete tracks with or without content or add tracks with or without content? Okay, so. All right, so say we're in our mixer here. All right.
Do you recall the day we first met?
All right, so let's say I want to take a mixer snapshot. Okay, and if we come over here now, let's say I want to.
It was 7th grade in the school parking lot, waiting on our yellow coach to ferry us home. You looked my way and your heart.
So I'll come over here. Let's just make the bass.
Caught my breath while you called me to. Well, even now I'm so in love with you, just like a long.
I'll add too much reverb, so let's take another snapshot.
Oh, I remember the day that we wed. Seems like a long time ago. And our first kiss, there was no regret. Right after that Garth Brooks show, you told your daddy and he called my mom. Said you were.
All right, so now I'll take a snapshot. So now if I want to recall my different mixer snapshots, just come here. And now we get to a point where you can say, okay, let's come over here. So I could start off with a mix, totally tear it down, and say, okay, I want to recall snapshot 2. Now these snapshots could also involve, okay, I don't want, let's say on my lead vocal, I don't want any effects, and I want it.
And I know your dad's pretty happy now, 'cause what began as our first kiss, it started all of this.
So let's say we have our.
Do you remember the day that we met?
So now if we take a snapshot, so I could go immediately back to snapshot 1, where we were.
And I still love you like that we met all along.
Now let's say I add a track here. Let's see what happens. Let's add an audio track here. We'll add 2 tracks. We'll call it What Will Happen. Okay, so now.
Do you recall the day we first? That was a long, long time ago.
Let's go back to snapshot 1.
The 7th grade.
So those tracks aren't going to have any impact. We're not seeing any changes because we haven't. Now what else we could do is just say, okay, on our snapshots we could say, let's just do selected tracks. So if I want to just select only the guitar, and we want, so if we come over here to the recall settings, I could say I only want to recall the, not the pre-section, the EQ, the sends, the pan, the volume. I just want to recall the inserts, EQ, and channel strip. So now when I come over here and we can say on selected channels only. So at this point I could say when I recall the snapshot, I could just recall, let's say we take a snapshot here. I want to, let's add some more inserts. Let's add an obnoxious EQ. Okay, I'll take a snapshot. So now when I do a snapshot going back to 1, it's not going to reset the volume. It's just going to reset the EQ, inserts, and channel strip. So this way, so if tracks are added or deleted, you could have it work only for the selected channels. And you could choose exactly which elements are recalled or aren't recalled. So it's quick overview of mix console snapshots, very helpful. Sometimes I like to build up a mix, you think it's great, start completely over, take a snapshot of mix 2, start completely over, take a snapshot of mix 3, and then compare. And then you could say, I want these tracks from snapshot 3, these tracks from snapshot 2, I want the reverbs from snapshot 1. So now you can never make a decision. It's great. It's just mix paralysis. So let me know if that's helpful for you, George. All right. Pablo's received 1 gallon of nougat ice cream. See, Flyv says, right on, previewing samples within the loading panel. Great job showing us, Greg. Thanks a bunch. So you're welcome. Maybe I attributed that to Val instead of Flyv. Sorry if I got that wrong. Gerald Ely is saying the Groove Agent pre-listen in place. I'm clear my throat. The Groove Agent pre-listen in place is my tip of the day. So that's good. All right, so we have Dwight Cunningham checking in from the Bahamas. Thanks for joining. All right, so we see sorry, my chat field jumped. All right, so we see a question from George. Says, in my studio setup, my interface is to Army Fire, maybe Fireface. It has SPDIF on an analog and an analog input. When recording guitar, I want to be able to use 4 channels, 1 stereo out, 1 mono DI signal, 1 mono amp. Can I set up Cubase 14 so I still have 4 tracks, and when I record enable, all the tracks are automatically record enabled? So one trick that you could do with that, so if you're setting up, let's say, okay, I want like 4 guitars, so let's just add maybe like 4 mono tracks. Okay, so let's say these are guitar 1 through 4. All right, so one is you could link the channels. So if you're doing this, you could say, okay, let's link the channels. And then you could just say, I want to link record enable. And if we could just say, okay, I only want to link selection and record enable. So if I come over here and I record enable one of the tracks, all of the tracks would be record enabled, or when I select one of the tracks, all 4 tracks would be linked. But my volume isn't linked, but record enable isn't. So you could do it within a link group. If you don't want to do a link group, another method and I do this for live recording all the time. Let's just add 4 tracks, and we'll call these guitar. And then I like to put these into a folder track. So we'll say move selected tracks to new folder. And in the folder, I could record, enable all of the guitars just by making this into a guitar folder. So I could just kind of come right over here and record, enable the guitars just by setting them into a folder. So 2 different methods. So like if I'm doing a live concert, like, we're done a lot of recordings where it's like, 48 tracks or 56 tracks. I would put all the tracks into a folder. Then I could just simply record, enable the folder, and all the tracks within the folder would automatically follow those settings. All right. I'm sorry if I misspoke and said Michael Teams instead of Michael Romanowski from Coast Mastering. Sorry about that. Just brain cramp on my end. Michael Romanowski and Michael Teams were both for 20 plus years. So. Okay, so we see Dwight Cunningham says, Greg, I noticed using my mouse on the chord pads versus my controller, I get different chord sound. Please explain if possible. Okay, so let's take a look. Okay, so let's say we have Rhodes here. All right, let's get to our chord pads. All right, and let me just say plain chords. Let's do a new project real quick. All right, so now we come here. So now I'm playing with my keyboard. So maybe it's the velocity sensitivity. So playing with mouse, play with keyboard. But maybe if I hit the keyboard with a lot of velocity, so I get more of a velocity range. And you may not get velocity range with just striking it with the mouse. It may be just set to a fixed velocity. Let's just check the settings here. Yeah, so I think that when you do the chords, it may be maybe just the velocity of how the instrument is responding when you click with the mouse. It might just trigger one common velocity value versus where you get different sounds depending upon the velocity. All right, Pablo says he's like number 68. Jeff Sabelski, great to see you on from Chico, California. All right, reading through. All right, so we see from at Source Studios, it says with MIDI file questions, says you see how it cuts, how cut one measure before, and before the MIDI starts, I'd like to set the start of the MIDI file to maybe 4 or 5 measures before, so I'm able to send to someone and have it sync up with other audio. All right, so let's just give it a shot here real quick. I'll just drag some chords out. All right, so say we have this set up here, so let's go ahead and glue all these together. All right, so when you listen to this, all right, so now let's take just a portion of the MIDI file here. Okay, so we're going to take those 3 measures. Okay, so let's go to our export locator range. Now let's import that MIDI file. We'll say no. All right, so we look at this, I'll move this track up here. So it looks like it took just what was in the locator range. Okay, so when you look at this, it says, yes, see how it cut it 1 measure before the MIDI starts. I'd like to set the start of the MIDI file to maybe 4 or 5 measures before, so I'm able to send someone, have it sync up with other audio. So I'm not sure if, do you want like 4 measures of blank data? Let me just see if I could read this. Yeah, see I'll cut 1 measure before the MIDI starts. I'd like to set the start of the MIDI file to maybe 4 or 5 measures before, so I'm able to send someone and have it sync. All right, so let's say if I have this over here, and let's say I just put a MIDI event here. Okay, so let's say if, and I'm just going to put just a quick, just 1 maybe one note as a container here. Or we'll put in just a nonsensical MIDI message. Okay, so I'm just going to put like a pan message here just so that there's some MIDI data to something. And let's see if we export this as a MIDI file. And I want to set the range. I'll try first with nothing. All right, so let's export the MIDI file here. Okay, so let's go ahead and import that. So we should see 6 measures. Let me just try exporting one more time. Not that. I'll just solo this particular track. So we'll see if it has to have maybe some type of so here it imported with the offset a couple bars before with the range selection tool. So, but let me know if you want to. So it says I'd like to set the start of the MIDI file to maybe 4 or 5 measures before, so I'm able to send to someone and have it sync up with other audio. So let me know if that makes any sense. I'm sorry if I'm misunderstanding. All right, so we see Pablo has to take off. He's sending lots of love from Spain and Galicia. Okay, so you see further clarification from at the Source Studios. Let's say the audio track started at measure 4, but MIDI notes only recorded at measure 30. I'd like to print the MIDI file so they could just drop in a project and start the same point as other audio. So, the MIDI file can retain its position, or it could retain kind of the relative position. But if you drag the MIDI file, so let's say if I come over here, like we have, so let's say I'll just do a new project here. But so maybe instead of importing, if you drag the MIDI file, so let's add a quick drum loop here. Okay, so all right, so let's see if we go over to like our media bay here And let's go to our file browser. We'll say desktop. And we'll say May 9th, beats bass MIDI. So when I come over here, I could just drag and drop. Let's see if that... So let's say if we do it with a range, I'm going to drag and drop this file in. So now if you drag and drop, it will automatically go. So if my bass is, this loop is starting at measure 9, where I've exported it with the range, and we do the range, that kind of takes the time positions out, and I drag this MIDI file over, we can get it to line up exactly at the same spot. So let me know if that makes sense, is helpful. Sorry if I'm misunderstanding. All right. All right, so we see Jeff Sabelski's got an English horn delivered for his May 25th concert at a nice church with a great pipe organ doing Brandenburg Concerto No. 4 with some strings and winds. And he's the only one doing English horn. It's a great piece, one of my favorites. Hope the performance goes well. Okay, just see Fly V says, ooh, snapshots, cool. All right, so we see question, just purchased a new Mac on M4 and in Cubase. I can't save my presets. It doesn't work. Any solutions? You know, if it's like track presets, I mean, my MacBook Pro here is fairly new, but if I wanted to save track presets, I could come over and, you know, we'll just come over here, save a track preset. So I wonder if it's maybe like a folder permissions thing. You know, let's see if there's sometimes, let's see if there's any, sometimes if you go to like your, you know, Mac OS sometimes could have some annoying things where you go to like your system settings and maybe you have to give permission for Cubase to save. Let's say like under accessibility, like if we come here to like privacy and security, and we choose, let's say, accessibility, like you may have to give permission for Cubase, maybe for saving presets, so maybe it's a permission access on Cubase. I'm not sure which one could be causing that. So let's see if we go to like app management. But there are some different settings here that you might have to. Let's just take a quick look. See if, you know, like here often, like when people can't record audio, they may have to enable Cubase to be able to have access to the microphone. So it's maybe one of these kind of permissions presets here. So maybe like File Vault, something along those lines. So, but if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, I'd be happy to kind of see if I could dig into it a little more. But it sounds like just a Mac OS permissions type of issue. All right, wonderful to see Tiago checking in from Brazil. So you see from George, it says, the folder track thing is really something I've totally overlooked. Great tip. Thanks, Greg. That's going to help me in my workflow a lot. All right. So Jazz Dude is pointing out that it's Alexander has been asking questions in Cyrillic. So thank you for that. I'll try to remember that. Yeah, we appreciate him being on. All right, so we have Gome just saying hi, Greg. Dwight Cunningham just says, Greg, thanks very much. All right, Best Green Jesus is our official resident lurker checking in. So you just have to hit the like button. But it's always good to see you and on the live stream. All right, always great to see Mark Rabin from Montana on with his dog Stella. Everyone give Stella a big woof at your home. And he's watching on mobile while walking the pup. All right, so we see Jeff Sabelski just says, hi, Greg. Is there a way to find conflicts of key switches for articulations in Dorico Pro 5 as the 4-string quartet, 4 tracks with expression maps, each VSTI, something is triggering trills? If you could send me your Dorico project, I'd be happy to take a look at it for you to see if I can find something. And let me know which libraries that you're using. And you can send that to me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right. So we see from Metlin Han, hey, how do you handle shortcuts for the lower zone editors? Enter Command E, Option Command E, B all seem redundant. Curious about your workflow and thoughts on this user interface issue. So a lot of times I trigger like the lower zone by double clicking, and there are preferences like where if you go to your preferences or settings and go to editors, that you could choose to double click opens in the lower zone or opens in a window, and open editor commands, which would be like the keyboard shortcuts, can, instead of going into the lower zone, could go into the standalone window editor. So how I do it is I will just double click kind of like a context sensitive aspect and double click various things to get into that editor. And if I wanted to see something like in a full screen score editor, then I would just trigger the particular keyboard shortcut to enable that. So that's my personal workflow with that. All right, Alexander asks, regarding saving presets, I saw in the Steinberg forum that I'm not the only one. It seems that I need to manually create a folder in the library presets. Yeah, I'll do some more research. If you want to email me, Alexander at clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, DigiBeats Music says, happy Friday. Going to spend the rainy Jamaica, Queens, New York weekend to dive into the drum machine and modulator. Wish me luck. So sounds like a great way to spend a rainy weekend. Let me see, Jazz Dudes also thinks it might be file permission issues going on. All right. All right, so Gome has 4 quick questions. 1, sometimes the project's audio drops from the project, but the volume on the channels are all functioning. Audio setup, it's all fine. Restarting the same project doesn't help. So, check to see if it is the same track all the time that's dropping. If you only play one track, does it drop? Are there any plugins? Sometimes some plugins may silent the signal. If it's in like a trial version mode, you could also just come over here, go to your studio setup and see what happens if you select your audio interface and then just make the buffer size as high as possible and see if that makes a difference as well. So maybe it's a performance issue where you're overloading one CPU core. Your audio performance is overloading one CPU core, and that could cause dropouts. Okay, next question. How do we change the track color from the inspector? So if you hold down the Alt or Option key, you could click here and you could set your colors for the track. You could also click here with the Alt or Option key held. You could also, while the Alt or Option key is held, just scroll through using the mouse scroll wheel. You could scroll through your colors like so, using your mouse scroll wheel. Okay, next question. How do we set up new custom patterns on Groove Agent? So if you have Groove Agent, the full version has kind of a pattern editor, but a lot of times if you have Groove Agent SE, the patterns, Groove Agent SE is just kind of a playback module where the patterns themselves are inside of the patterns themselves are inside of the MIDI part or a MIDI plugin. So if you wanted like a quick easy way to make patterns, let's just come over to my window menu here and just come over, open this up. Okay, so if we wanted to go to a MIDI plugin, we could go to something like the Beat Designer. And now what I could do, so if I have Groove Agent SE, I could just come right over here. Let's open up Groove Agent SE. So let's say while we're playing, if I wanted to come over, say, okay, let's do kick, make sure it's, and you could just program patterns directly in here. You could also, if we go to add an instrument, we could set the Groove Agent SE. So let's add a Groove Agent SE, and we could make it into a pattern event. So when we come here, we can now kind of double click and we could add additional voices. So we're starting from, let's say, and at this point we could just add more sounds and we could program patterns directly into here. Now if we have a full version of Groove Agent, so let's just add full Groove Agent version, because you didn't specify SE, that now we could, let's go to load a kit. I'll just load a kit here. And then when we go to the pattern, we could just come in here and program patterns directly from within Groove Agent. So we could just program patterns within a grid right there. And then the fourth question in this series is root key is not matching with Media Bay auditioning. All right, so I'll just do a new project here. So this is a feature that was added in Cubase 14. So I'll just create empty. All right, so I'm going to set my project root key. Let's see if I may have to enable it. All right, so let's say my project root key here is set to, let's say, D. Okay, and I want to audition different loops. So let's come over here. Let's get to loops and samples. And let's go to like some of the loop mash content here. Okay, now when we see this, we could say, okay, we want to link to the transpose track. If we turn this on, and let's say we want to find like saxophone. So now if I turn this off, so you can see that that is now, if I come here, let's go back to D. That will automatically follow the root keys. So let's say if we want to come over here to synth bass, and we play the same loop. So let's go from E to A. So you can, depending if the root key is part of the file itself. So let's say, so if the root key information is there, you could just simply have this automatically follow the project root key by clicking in there. So, all right. All right, so we see Jazz Dudes think it's the set permissions in Mac OS Sequoia and provided a link. So we see that Alexander will try. All right, Tony Trunzo from Australia asks, hi Greg, with that MIDI import to a different position question, what I do is place the playhead at whatever the bar is, and then I go to the edit tab and move it to the start of the cursor. Maybe might help. So yeah, let's see if I want to import one of the MIDI files here. I move the playhead, so we'll give that a try. Thanks for suggesting, Tony. All right, so it says, do you want to create a new project? We'll say no. All right, so we'll try the very first one. Yeah, and it looks like it'll import the first note at the playhead position, so that's a great suggestion, Tony. Thanks for sharing that. All right, so we see Gome just says thank you so much. All right, so we have Yael Amen just saying hello. Thanks for joining us today. We see Ben Tyerman just saying Jazz Duty's still on Mac OS Monterey. Likes it a lot. Haven't tried the latest OS, but it'll take some time to learn coming from Windows. Jazz Dude's also suggestion with permission says if you're a newbie to use a Mac for music production like I do, this might help to disable system integrity protection on the Mac. And you can find that in YouTube. All right, let's see, I think let me go jump to some of the questions that were mailed in. Okay. Okay, so the first question we had was how to make a drum map from the Iconica Sketch percussion preset. Okay, so let's load up a quick preset here. I'll load it in Howling Sonic. Okay, so some of the instruments, so we come over here, let's get to our percussion map. So it's kind of all various orchestral instruments. So we have lots of instruments, and then, but remembering where the different instruments are. So let's see if this works. I think if we go to select this, and we go to the drum map, we'll say no drum map. I'm going to, let's see if we could create a drum map from the instrument. So we'll do that. Look, the drum map's automatically carried over into the pattern editor. That's interesting. All right, but let me add this Iconica Sketch not in a pattern mode. Sorry, let me just come over here. Okay, so let's come over to the percussion in Iconica Sketch. Okay, so now we have the Iconica Sketch. We will come over and create the drum map from the instrument. And now when we double click, we can see all of the sounds automatically populated from Halion, and this does it for Groove Agent as well. But now we could see exactly all of the different instruments. So if we come here and put triangle in or cowbell, we can put all and see the names of all the orchestral instruments so that you don't have to type it in manually. All right, let's jump back, see if we have some more live questions. We'll come back. All right, let's go to our next question that was submitted. So this from the last live stream, it just says, can you change the color of notes out of range in the score editor, to be able to extend that? All right, so let's say if I have a clarinet piece here, we'll look at this in our score editor. All right, and when we want to see notes and their note coloring, we would go to the score menu and say we want to notes out of range of the particular instrument. So let me just okay, so if I come here, let's move some of these clarinets down below their range. All right, so now we can see that these particular notes are out of range of the instrument, the typical playing range of the acoustic instrument. So we get these particular color indications. So again, if we go to our score menu, we can just choose to not have those enabled. So, but if we want to extend the range of that, and I think I was on the right path last time, but if we go to the instruments, and then we can say filter pitches above or below, that we could just simply adjust those, and then we could see, but I think it's still like the instrument will tend to be out of range regardless, but check the instrument settings and then filter pitches below particular notes right there. So, all right. Okay, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. Would you mind showing us how we can use Cubase 13 Pro to create a vocal harmony from one vocal take? Example, one vocal is a first and another two doing a fifth and a third. Thank you for your time. All right, so. Okay, it's just. I'll revert this. Okay, so a couple of ways to approach it. So let's say we're playing along here.
Do you recall the day we first met?
All right, so first off, I want to take I have like an acoustic guitar. I have a chord track, so I want to figure out what the chords are. So I'm going to drag the acoustic guitar or the MIDI part to the chord track. So we now have our chords have been extracted from the particular instrument. So now if I want to create harmonies, there's a couple easy ways of doing it. So
the day we first met, that was a long, long time ago.
So I want to take that particular phrase and say, okay, let's take that. And if we go to our project window, we could say, or audio menu rather, and we'll say generate harmony voices, and we'll say give us 2 harmonies. I will just kind of decrease the volume here. So let's just come.
The day we first met, that was a long, long time ago. That was a long, long time ago.
And then if you want to change like the voicing, so let's say if we just listen to this one voice.
That was a long, long time ago.
I could just come over to like the chords, and we could say, okay, I want to do, instead of a soprano, I want it to be a tenor. So I could just change the voicing, the harmony.
That was a long, long time ago.
So now we could just listen to that and listen to that harmony.
That was a long, long time ago.
So you could take each of the harmonies. Now, some people I know will come over, they will duplicate this particular track. They may come over and create a new audio file. You could just bounce selection. Let's come over here to Vary Audio, and we'll do its analysis of this particular track. So another method, and I know people do this very successfully, they will switch the colors here. So we can say, let's follow the scale and the chords. And now that we're doing this, we're going to say our scale assistant in Vary Audio, we want to use the chord track. So when we see green notes, these green notes are within the particular scale. So I could come, so we're basically.
That was a long, long time ago.
So now I could just take this and I move it to another green note.
Long, long time ago.
And I could just say, okay, let's tighten this up. Pitch-wise. So now I want to take all of these and move it to another green note.
Day we first met, that was a long, long time ago.
And you can say, okay, maybe I want to move this up so the color you want is green. So as you move, so now I can just take that second duplicated part.
Time ago. It was 7th grade in the
Yep.
Sorry about that. Hit the wrong voice and put on a goofy pitch shifter on my voice. All right, so you could either just kind of create the harmonies and you could edit those harmonies together, or you could just kind of take the existing part, and then if you want to do very audio, and if you have the chords, you just use the scale chords and just kind of, draw the chords in, because it's not always going to be a perfect fifth or a major third up that creates the harmony. So depending on a chord, it may be the minor third that's within the scale. So you could kind of do it manually or create the harmonies yourself. A couple different ways. All right, let me jump back to live questions, see if we got some more questions. All right, let me see Peter checking in from Montreal. All right, so we see Michael Team says he'll probably be calling to help on changing the outboard effects to new configuration in the patch bays. Still working out how it needs to be. So basically I have one pair of inputs shared. So yeah. All right, so we see Flyv just says I can't hear anything, Greg. So let's see if anyone else is having problems. All right, see Gerald Ely's taking off. Who's going to watch the rest of the stream later. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we see from Ben Tyerman, just says, how did it do that with the chord track? So if you want to populate a chord track, either from, so I'll just revert this and show that feature again. So all you have to do is drag like a track with chords, or a MIDI part that has some chords in it. So I have an empty chord track here, and I'm just going to drag this event from the chord track up, does its analysis, and lays out all the chords for you. You could also just select the track, go to your project menu, and we'll say, let's go to our chord track, and we'll say create chord events, and it will do the analysis and place them there. It just feels cooler dragging it for some reason. Same result. And if it's a MIDI part, like a MIDI piano, you could do the same thing. Okay, so we see Flyv says, oh, new computer accidentally muted for about 5 minutes. Sorry about that. That's my nightmare, is doing a live stream for 2 hours and it's, no one can hear it. So always like, oh no, did I totally screw something up? All right. All right, so we have Vincent checking in. Thanks for joining us. All right, James Lowndes asks, I'm having a problem with Control Room. I'm getting audio through my speakers from the song, but there is no metering. But my reference track does. In Control Room, I have output ASIO equals ASIO 1 plus 2. All right, so I'm getting audio through my speakers from the song, but there is no metering. but my reference track does in control room. So it could be, so let's say if I do a quick audio mix down of this, just so we can have So if you're setting up your Cubase to use it as like a control room for like a reference mix, all right, so let me just get this exported out real quick. All right, so let's say this mix down track here. Okay, so my mix down track, I'm going to send it out to my, we'll say to my cues here. So let me just get my cue sends. Okay. So I want to send this out to my reference. So this is not going out to my, it's going to no bus, it's going to my reference.
Waiting on our yellow coach to ferry us home.
So if I come over here, we can say
You
Q1,
look my way.
and I'll just take this particular mix and I'll put like a silly flanger on it so we know that this is a different mix. So just for
Hard showroom. It caught my breath while you called me to.
all right, so say this is
Well,
our
even
reference.
now I'm so in love with you, just like a long, long time ago.
All right, so when you go to the mix of all the tracks, there
Oh, I remember the day that we went. Seems
Still
like a long,
playing,
long
and let's
time
see
ago.
so if I'm using my reference here to go to
Our
Q
first
mix
kiss,
1,
there was no regret. Right after
so they're still
the show.
visible,
Told your daddy and he called my mom.
and this is the
Said you
multi-track
were too
mix.
damn good for any boy that dumb. His soured words are now.
Okay, so let me just reread this. So I'm getting audio through my speakers from the song, but there's no metering, but my reference track does. So check, usually if there's no metering, it's maybe that it's going to a destination. So let me, I'm going to create an audio output here. So check the audio routing. So I'm going to go to my audio connections, and let's get to outputs, and I'll add an output bus. We'll make it stereo. I'm going to call this goes nowhere. So if all of my tracks are now, let's say we're here, and all these tracks are routed to like go nowhere. So just check your routing again. So, I mean, it seems like you should be seeing the metering, but if it's absolutely not going, let's say if I just take this guitar track and we send it to So we still see that, but just check the output routing, and let me know also how you have, like, when you say the reference going, but your reference track, is the reference track going through like a control room queue, or is it going through a different source? All right, so you see Ben Tyron says, goodness me, that's amazing. All right, so Joystick Jutsu asked, why don't mixer channels mute when I select multiple channels and click the mute button or press M? If I select multiple tracks in Arranger and press M or S, it doesn't work, but it works, but not when I click. All right, so let's just set up. All right, so you might have to use like Quick Link. So let's add number of audio tracks here. Gonna hide my input channels. Okay, so when I come over here, if I select my channels, I could just mute solo. So let's say if I do this in, let's select a number of channels here in the mixer, and I solo. So I think if you hold down Alt plus Shift, like when you're doing it from the mix console, you could activate the Q link. So you could do this by holding Alt plus Shift, and then sorry, let me get the right, or if you just engage the Q link and then solo, it would do it for all the selected channels in the mixer. Or so this way it does it for the selected channels. So if you're doing it within the mixer, just activate Q link, and then you could solo and mute your multiple channels in the mixer. And because sometimes you're linking, you have like more sophisticated linking options, so that's why it's set up a little differently, because you may have a link group where the link group doesn't have isn't carrying, isn't set up to linked soloed aspects of channels. So try just when you're in the mix console, just activate the Q link. Yeah. So you see, just from your question, so you'll need Q link in the mixer for the mixer functionality for that to work. All right, so you see James Lounge says also have the reference, and it's metering. It's set up through the queue. So it seems like it was still metering for me. But check the output routing of that. Okay. Okay, Uno Memento says, Greg sent us an email about the chord tracks, wondering why some chord symbols have a space between the root chord and the tension. For example, D minor 7 looks kind of strange, so does the B minor 7 flat fifth. Yeah, so we discussed this on the last live stream, and I wasn't able to recreate that, but if you have a project that you want to send me to Club Cubase at steinberg.de, I'll open up the project. I even kind of mimicked the chords from the screenshot. So I'll just open that up so we could see. And I tried a couple different preferences, but like when I come here, like the tensions were kind of right up next to the chords. But check to see, I'll show you my preferences for the chord naming. So if you go to event display and then go to chords and pitches, let me know like if your preferences here match what I have. I'll try, just the one difference obviously is you have the display B as H in yours. Let me see if that makes any difference. But no, These are what I have for my preferences, and you can see that when we look at all of the chords, they all kind of show up as expected here, where the tensions are kind of right next. And I saw your screenshot where there's kind of like a space or two between the tensions and the kind of the chord. But everything here on my end kind of looks as expected. But if you want to email me your project, I'd be happy to look at it for you. All right, so we have a question. I know you can have the project window synced with the mix console. It's great to have. However, have I understood correctly, you cannot use the visibility agents when the mixer is closed? I know you could use Q-Link to mute and solo multiple... Oh, sorry. All right, so it's a different question. However, I understood you correctly, you cannot use the visibility agents when the mixer is closed. So I'm going to close the mixer here. We'll close our lower zone. Let me just go to a different project here. Want some more tracks. Okay, so I'm going to close the mixer in the lower zone. And let me just add a couple group tracks here. We'll add a couple, we'll add an effects track. Let's add a sampler track. All right, so we have a number of different tracks. So I have no mixer open. So let's just come over here to, all right, let me just see if I may have to. So we'll go to our track visibility agents. All right, so now when we come over here, we could just say, okay, I only want to see sampler tracks. You know, I want to see group tracks. I want to see effects tracks. So they still work. On the main project window, make sure that you right click and that you have the track and visibility configurations active right there. Let me just reread it, make sure understanding. So yeah, you could definitely use the visibility agents on the project window while it's closed. So you could just kind of click here. You want to see all track types, and we want to mute or unsee our group channels. Let's say we have our effects channels here, so let's hide those. Let's hide our sampler track. So it still works the same manner. So let me know if I'm misunderstanding. All right, and we see some James Lowndes says, and with the reference track, that was in Cubase 13, but I don't think much actually, I don't think there's any differences between 13 and 14. But let me know also, you know, if you're switching, James, if you're switching your Q mix here, or if you defined your Q mix. So if you go to your audio connections to control room, you know, if you don't, you know, if you have your reference set here for like output 1 and 2, all right, and let's say we go to HS7 and we don't have anything. So now if I come over here, I could hear let me just set this up. So like the bass will go to the Q mix. So now if I go to Q1, I don't hear any of the other tracks but if we go to the audio connections and we set our Q mix here to not connected, it seems counterintuitive at first, but then what we're going to do is listen to the Q mix in our main control room, which is routed to these outputs. So let's say if we're but now if I come over here, I could listen to the Q mix from the control room. And then if I do that, but let me know exactly how you have the routing, but probably what you want. If you're using the reference is go to your audio connections and make sure that you have your monitor set. You don't have to have any routing here for the Q mix, but you could listen to the Q mix in the control room area. All right, so we see from Vincent says, I love the idea of not having to do additional macros or key commands to show certain tracks in the project window. Without it's possible, but as I understand, if you have the mix console opened, so. All right, Ben Tyman likes the song better with the flanger on. Okay. All right, so we see from Peter, says I recently loaded the new Austin Hall Cubase demo. I tried inserting the maximizer on the stereo bus, but it is grayed out, unable to edit/remove the inserts. It's probably the constrained delay compensation may be enabled. So if you look in a very far left-hand corner, so if I come here and I see like in my master output, I have a plugin with a lot of latency on it as my inserts. Let's say we go to like a multi-band compressor. All right, so now when I enable the plugin delay compensation, the constrained delay compensation here, and we open up that particular channel, I may have it set high. Let me just try with like the vocal chain. All right, so now when I do this, I can't move it, I can't edit. So try just to come over here, turn off the constrained delay compensation, and now when you come right over here, then it's visible again. So that will become invisible. So now when I come here, we turn this on, that will become deactivated. And when we just come over here, turn that on again, that'll be activated where we could make and modify settings right there. All right. So we see James is saying the reference is going through the control room queue. Okay. Bill Holler says, Greg, you do a great job. Thanks. All right. All right, so we see from Vincent says, just clarification, sorry if I misunderstood. To be more specific, I've created my own configurations in the mix console. Can I not recall these in the project window without having the mix console open? I don't think so. So if it's all right, so let's say if I come into my mix console and I hide these let's say I hide my guitar and bass tracks here. Okay, so let's see if I now close my mix console. They're still hidden right there. And we can go to the visibility tab, so you may not be able. So once you click on the visibility tab, so I don't think that there's a way to. So these are just kind of synced with the lower zone mix console here. So it's not. But let's say if I now let's go to the configuration. I want to add a configuration. I'll say no guitar or bass. All right, and let's say if I want to, if I had another configuration, and maybe I won't open up the lower zone mix console, so I want to see these, and we'll say I want no drums. So I would come over here. Let's go to configuration. Let's add a configuration and say no drums. So now mix console isn't open. I could just come right over here, say no guitar, no bass, no drums. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Vincent. All right, so you see from Vincent, says, while monitoring my chord track with a instrument, it plays, but the note holds and doesn't end. What's the trick to this? So if you have what I would do if it's, maybe it's not receiving the MIDI note off message. Let me just come back here. If you have like a MIDI note that's hung, go to your MIDI menu and just click on reset. That will send a note off message and all notes and all MIDI channels and all MIDI ports. So try just to come right over here and just do the MIDI reset there. All right, so see Peter just says that did it, Greg. Thank you, much appreciated. And Michael Team says revelation today, constrained delay. Woohoo! Great question, Pete. All right, Gareth. Wonderful to see Gareth on. Says constrained brain. All right, and Michael Teams is happy to see Gareth on. All right, let's go to next question that was asked, sent in advance. Okay, so this question, so it's basically how to route audio and trigger from a MIDI instrument in a synthesizer. So it's kind of like how to play MIDI notes that were routed into a synthesizer, and it's kind of using, they sent a tutorial video is kind of based on Serum. So let's go ahead and see if we could recreate this. All right, so we'll start off with a kind of typical drum track here. So let's say, all right, so I'll select this track and I'll bypass. So let's say we have our drum track here. And the idea is to kind of get a new sound design sound utilizing running this into like a synthesizer. Now, if we put a vocoder plugin on the instrument in Cubase 13, shipped with a vocoder plugin, so it's really handy. I can now take a MIDI track and I'm going to route the MIDI track, its output, to go into the vocoder. So we set the MIDI out to go into the vocoder. So if we're adding a MIDI track, we want to now take the MIDI output port and send this to the vocoder, to the input of the vocoder. Now once we do that, We want to now be able to set our MIDI input for this track. So MIDI is going to come in from my keyboard, and we want to, where we see MIDI, we want to set this to external. So now when I play, don't really hear anything. I'm going to play a chord from my keyboard. So now we're playing it along with the vocoder. So the MIDI, and if I was to open up just a quick on-screen MIDI keyboard so you can see what I'm doing here. So as we play, we don't really hear anything until we're actually, and I will set this up. Let me just, all right, so I'll move my octaves up here on my keyboard. So now as I play, now let's say I want to take, instead of using the internal sounds on the vocoder, I wanted to route this out to another instrument, let's say like a retro log. So what I want to do now is on this particular instrument, we're going to activate the side chain. Okay, let's see if I remember how to do this. Is activate the side chain, and on the retro log, its output, we want to send it to the sidechain input of the vocoder. So now I'm going to open up the retro log, and instead of using the internal synth, we're going to sidechain the routing of the vocoder into the instrument. So we could do this with any VST instrument. So now when I come over and we hit play, we'll just, let's just, so if I want to run it through different instruments and filters, or different presets here. So often like pad sounds. So now we're just basically sidechaining the MIDI information. So if we have just MIDI chords, so as we would play, you know, with our on-screen keyboard, I could just come right over here, and as it's playing, we're going to take the MIDI from this track, sidechain it into the vocoder. We're going to send the vocoder signal, instead of its internal synth, we're sidechaining it directly to the output of Retrolog. So we take the instrument track, and for its audio output, this is where we sidechain. So we would just come right over here, and on the routing page for Retrolog, instead of sending it to the stereo out, we send it to the sidechain input. So, and then we could have that particular sound and do all sorts of really creative, interesting sound design tasks. You know, so not only can we route into the vocoder and send MIDI into that, then we could route it to the vocoder and sidechain the vocoder into an instrument for more creative sound design type tasks. All right. Let's jump back some more live questions. Okay, so you see Vincent just says, okay, if you see, if you create the visibility configurations in the mix console, do you see them are they recallable in the project window? So let's jump back to that. Okay, I'm just going to revert this. Okay, so let's say I go to my project consoles here. So I want this visibility. So let's just do it in the full screen mix console. All right, so let's say I have this set to sync the project in mix console 1. So we come over here. I want to save this. Let's come over to our configurations. I'll say no drums, no. Okay, so I'm going to close my project window here. Let's close the lower zone mixer. All right, I'm going to go over, make sure that we have the track of visibility and configurations, and let's see. Yeah, so it doesn't look like that preset is there, because let's see if, make sure that this is set to sync. Yeah, so it doesn't look like it's recalled there. But let me just... Yeah, so I see where if you save it in the mix console, that it's going to be set there, but it's automatically reflected the channel settings, because I think that when we add a configuration here, and I guess you could save the configuration. So let's say if we call this no drums, and then if I come back here, let's say I want to show all tracks. Yeah, so I'll mention that to the team just to see, you know, but I can see why you may want different channel configurations than the mix console. I can see where maybe you'd like to have the mix console presets show up there. So I'll mention that to the team. Sorry you ran into that. Okay, Donnie Axon asks, how to use time warp to detect tempo. All right, so a lot of times we could, there's different time warp modes, so let's just do a quick new project here. All right, and I'm going to import an audio file that doesn't have, so a lot of times we could do, if we wanted to manually do a tempo detection, we could do that using the time warp tool, and there's 3 modes with the time warp tool. All right. So a lot of times people will, you know, one of the more popular ways is using free warp, but there's also warp grid. So let's say if I come over here, and let me just undo that. So I'm going to switch the tools. I think we have like a little bit of a pickup here. So let's say,
let me let you know what I'm about.
So if we wanted to grab the warp tool, so we'll just select our warp tool here, and what I could do is say,
Let me let you know.
And we say this is where measure 3 should start. So we'll say measure 2 starts right here. Measure 3 is probably there. So we say measure 4 is starting probably right here. And if we make this larger, it's a little easier to kind of see transients. So, and then you could manually adjust. So let's say, okay. So measure 5 is here. And I think if we hold down the shift key, that we could kind of just adjust and have kind of similar tempos throughout. So you could now just kind of grab, so once you're in like the warp grid, you can now just come right over here and just kind of move the bars. So you get directly below the bars and say, this is where measure 10 is, this is where measure 11 should be. And at that point, you could create a tempo map. So as we do this, I open up a tempo track. So we say add track, tempo. All right, and let me just adjust my tempo range here. But now you can see kind of all of our tempo changes as we move the bar line to exactly where it should be, that we will get tempo changes. So you could do this for every beat if you want to be more accurate. So you could do it manually. A lot of people have shied away from that because you could also just come over here and go to project to tempo track and do a tempo detection, and this could automate that process for you. So you listen to it.
Let me let you know what I'm about and what is in, what is outside in the cold. I walk alone.
So we're now to listen to.
Let me tell you lies about me.
So, but if you wanted to manually do that, just put it into warp grid and then go directly below the bar, and then you could adjust, basically move the bar line to match the musical material, and that would create a tempo map for you. Okay, Jonathan Elgol, are there any plans for AI features in Cubase or maybe integration with AI-based VSTI such as Singer AI apps that are coming along? So generally Steinberg doesn't, there are like some AI functionality, like, with the drum machine that we're seeing, we haven't shown anything with AI singers, but most of them are using VST3 technology for integration. So what we'll see, Yamaha was kind of the first company to do this probably 20 years ago with Vocaloid, which is still available. So, but it's not a Steinberg product. It's kind of a Yamaha product. Not as popular in the United States as it is in Japan for anime, musical acts and stuff like that. But we'll see what comes. But generally Steinberg doesn't announce to the market and to our competitors what we're working on next. But you see a lot of wonderful AI functionality, like some of the noise suppressant and like the dialogue matching features in Nuendo, and spectral layers for removing removing different elements and unmixing is AI based. So, but nothing has been announced. All right, so we see Michael Teams flew over Bilbao, Spain yesterday and waved hi to Gareth and Lola. All right, so we see question, how to upload stems in Cubase. So generally stems are just going to be like individual files. So to do that, you would just come over and import audio file, and you could import multiple files at once. So if you wanted to come here, we could say, okay, I want to take all of these tracks and let me just import all those files, and we can say, do we want to put it on one single track or put them onto different tracks? So now I could put all the files on different tracks like so. All right, so we have another question from BB23 King, and how to turn my recordings to MP3 or WAV. So as you record audio into Cubase, it's going to be a WAV file. If you wanted to mix down like a multi-track into a WAV file, we could come right over here. Like if you have multiple sources, instruments, and you want to make a WAV file from it, you would go to your export audio mix down, and then we could say I want to do a single file. We'll say our stereo out. And here we could choose whether it's going to be a wave at whatever sample rate, whatever bit resolution, or if you want it to be an MP3 file, excuse me, or an MP3 file, you could choose that as the file format and just hit export, and then everything could be exported as a .wav or MP3 file. All right, so Donnie Axon just says thank you. We see James Lounge says I'm not getting any audio or metering from my audio track. I turned off control room and went to output section, studio audio connections, turn on the ASIO out, and still no audio or metering. So really check just the outputs. Like if you start a brand new project with one, drop a loop in. Check the output tab. So if you want it. It really almost sounds like an output routing issue. Like maybe it was being sent to a bus that no longer exists. So if I come here, let's say, okay, I want to get to a loop. I have, an audio file here. So we should, see if you get that. And if you look at the file and you go to the inspector, that this is going to a stereo out. So if I sent this, if it was like a routing thing where, okay, it's sent to no bus and I go to play it, we don't hear anything. If it's being routed, let's say it's going to the stereo out, but it's now routed to a group track. So we're going to add a group track to that. So we add our stereo group. And then let's say we delete this group. So we remove the selected track. All right, so now we play. You don't hear anything because this routing is going to no bus. So just really check the output routing one more time and just make sure that that is looking as expected. All right, so Vincent just says, thank you, Greg. I assume you see the convenience of having it show up in the project window as well, right? And if you want separate configs, you can still have the option. Yeah, so I'll make sure to pass it on. All right. CBB23 King just says, thank you, Greg. Joystick Jutsu says, hope I didn't miss much. Had to grab coffee. So you can't talk about getting coffee. I'm going to have to sit here for 4 hours and answer questions. It's an unspoken rule. Pablo always gets a coffee and mentions coffee, just knowing that I can't take a break to get one. So, but if I had one, I'd have to take a bio break, I'm sure. All right, let's go. I think we had another question that was mailed in. Let me get to that. All right, so we had a question. It says, I asked a question about the names of articulations on the expression map in the score editor have disappeared. They were there in the beginning, but after making a change, they've disappeared. Greg asked me to send a file, so it's the beginning of the composition. I hope you can help me because it's now shooting in the dark if I use the right articulation. All right, so I think I have the file. just might still be open. Yeah. All right, let me just respond to this quick text. Excuse me just 1 second. All right, so let's take a look at our expression map in the score editor. So come over here. All right, so I see all right, let me just check the, all right, so it's going to start off. Okay, so we look at this, we'll see kind of, we're going to have sustain, vibrato. So as we go to listen to it, we'll look at it in the score editor. Okay, so let's come over, I think it might be in the inspector. All right, and let me just, that is maybe in here. Let me just see. To see if it's in here somewhere. All right, so you have the legato kind of set up there. Let me just, all right, let me just see if I can find it super quick. me just see if it's something that maybe shows up on the project window. All right, let me just check on this and don't think there's anything. All right, let me just see if I could do a quick. Let me see if I could look this up super quick. Sorry. So I thought it was maybe over here, but I'll play around with this some more and see if I get the answer, and I'll email you back. Sorry about that. All right. All right, so we have a question. Just says the mouse pointer over audio event in the timeline, and then when I use the scroll wheel, the waveform gets fatter or skinnier. What is this feature calling? What is this feature called? What is it doing? Can it cause clipping? All right, so if we have just an audio event, all you'd have to do is come over here. All right, so if we kind of use your scroll wheel, so if we're zooming in and out like this where it's getting fatter and skinnier, what we're doing is we're just kind of zooming in on the waveform, so we're not actually altering any of the gain. You could also, if you come here, it may look like it's getting louder or softer, but this is just a visual zoom of the audio waveform right there. So it's not adjusting the gain, so the gain would still play back the same. It's just like if you have a lot of low level amplitude and you need material in a waveform and you need to zoom, you can adjust there to increase and just zoom the appearance of the audio waveform. All right, let's jump back to live questions. All right, Donnie Axon just says, how to sync sample or audio track with current timeline tempo. Can use audio warp. All right, so let's say if I was doing, let's see if this is. Okay, so let's say we have a tempo, we have a file here. So and let's say this file is fluctuating in tempo. So when we come over here and we listen to it, it's steady, not steady tempo. All right. So how to sync sample or audio track with the current time tempo. All right, so let's say our tempo is at 120 beats. So what I need to do first is if I have a file that's varying in tempo, what it's going to do, I need to find out what the original tempo changes are. So I'm going to do a tempo detection, again from my project window to tempo track to tempo detection. We'll analyze it. So what I want to do now is to come over here, and we will choose to go to your audio menu, to advanced, and we'll say set definition from tempo. So let's say roughly we're like 178 beats a minute roughly. Now if I want this to play back steady, now that I've done that set definition from tempo, I can come over here. I'm going to turn off the tempo map. And at this point, whatever tempo, I'm playing it at 120 beats a minute. Let's do it at 150. So now it's playing to whatever tempo information that the project is at. It's kind of a tempo parasite. So now it's at 176, like a rough medium tempo, and perfectly steady. Now if I want another file to sync with that, if the file, so we'll come over here, let's find a quick drum loop. Okay, so let's say I want to drag this file in. I could just come right over here. And what we want to do is to place this file into musical mode. And once that's in musical mode, it's going to automatically follow the tempo changes of the file. So that as we come right over here, we play along. So this is dynamically speeding up and slowing down to match the steady tempo. And if I put this on the original tempo where it's fluctuating, I could come over here. Let's have it follow the tempo track. So now this track is following the tempo map that was extracted from the original file. But if I say, okay, I want this all to be 168 or 162. So these files are stretching in real time to automatically match the existing tempo in the project. All right, so we see Radar the band back on. All right. So we see Vincent just asked, did you find time to see the video? Emailed you, by the way, the changes to workspaces. Any thoughts? So, you know, I think most of them are good suggestions I passed along. I'm not sure if having a preference for saving a global or project workspace makes sense to me, but it's been passed along. All right. All right, we see Val's heading off for a gig. Have a wonderful gig. All right, so we see Jay Allen says, Johnny Ray from the Bay Area on board. Really do appreciate you. So thanks for joining and popping in and say hi. All right, so I think we are out of questions. We'll see if there's any other questions that kind of pop up. So we see Donnie Axon just says, I see. Thanks, Greg. So let me know if that makes sense. All right, Bootlu Demis just says, hello, Greg. Is there an option to not scan plugins on every Cubase startup? Thanks. So usually it will scan just to make sure that, if you're working on a particular project and then suddenly it's not working, it gives you a heads up that this plugin, like maybe the trial version expired or the license isn't active because it's on subscription and you didn't get your credit card payment or whatever. So it will, and there's two different types of scans. There's a scan to make sure that the plugin is active because you may be working on a project, save it, and without a plugin being active, if you weren't aware of it, then you go back and it's like, you get the plugin working. If you save it without the plugin because you weren't aware, you change and modify the project. And then there's like the first time you start Cubase, it will actually, as you're opening up the project, as you're opening Cubase, it will scan not only the integrity of the plugin to see if it causes issues, but it will also measure the latency of the particular plugin so that you could, and that's when it does its latency calculation so that it can handle all the delay compensation. So that's generally only the first time that you start Cubase, or if a new plugin has been added, but it's just a safety precaution so that you're aware of if certain plugins don't work or aren't functioning in your system, and that if you have projects with those, that those are a crucial part, that you're aware of it and you don't just kind of move on and negate all the work you did with that particular plugin just because you didn't know. All right. See, Uno Mementos wishing a good weekend to everyone. All right, we'll see if there's any other questions that sneak in. I'll give it a minute or two. All right, so we see Lawrence Koch from Rhode Island checking in. All right, let's just give it our minute or two. All right, so we see from Donnie Axon asks, and how does track from project import use for? This can import the tempo set from a project too. So you could use that to automatically import the particular tempo tracks from data. But let's say if you're working on like maybe a different version of a file, or let's say, okay, we have this and I want to come over and let's import a track from a different project. So maybe I'm taking something that was 10 songs and I want to make it into one long song that I trigger for live performance. So here we could just come over and do the import tracks from project. So we could select the project. And something else that's very handy is that if you're starting off with like a particular template, you could just say, okay, I want to import like all the channel and inspector settings, but I don't want to import like the wave files. So if I come over here, I can now just import like those particular tracks into a project. So instead of like we could drag and drop, but if we wanted to take particular files, tracks from one project into another, we could just simply use the particular, you could use particular elements of just the mixer, or you want just the media, you want automation, you don't want automation. So let's say you're sending it to someone to be mixing, or to build a template from a particular file, you could do that as well. All right. So you see Michael Teams checking out. All right, so Bratman Studio says, Greg, can I send a Cubase file to you? Do you need it in a certain way? 14 Pro, if I used audio and some internal sounds, is that okay? So yeah, that's fine. You could send it if it's too big to send in an email, especially with audio files. You could just simply send it via like a WeTransfer type of link. Check out one other thing real quick. Just had a thought on the clarinet piece that we're looking at. All right, so let me see if I come here and we look at it in the score editor. I thought maybe we might be able to see it here, but let me just take one last look through the inspectors here. All right, let's see if there's any other questions that sneak in. If not, we'll go ahead and wrap up. All right, so we see from Bratman Studio, can I send you a Dropbox permission then? So yeah, you could definitely send a Dropbox version over, so no problems there. All right, we'll see if there's any other questions that sneak in. If not, we will go ahead and wrap up a little early. I'll just try with one other file for see if we get the articulations going. All right, just seeing if it's anywhere. So it looks like maybe yeah, so I'll do some more research and see if I can figure that out, but we'll see if there's more questions. Let's see. All right, wonderful to see Brian Sawyer Sr. from Yuma, Arizona, formerly of North Carolina. All right, so I think we're out of questions, so we'll go ahead and wrap up just a little bit early. Thanks for all the wonderful questions, and if you've learned something new, make sure that you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. We'll be back at Tuesday at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time, and if you need to send questions in advance, send it to clubcubase@steinberg.de. Everyone, please have a wonderful, safe, and healthy weekend, and we'll see you back on Tuesday. Goodbye.